Hey everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. One of the biggest announcements of the last week was that Ukraine is preparing some kind of a new offensive where they want to penetrate Russian lines and get to Crimea in 2024. Is that a possibility? Can they do it? Is it a good idea? Let's talk about that. Let's also discuss the situation on the front line, and I will have a special message at the end of the video. The rumored Ukrainian offensive in 2024 is said to penetrate Russian fortification lines around the Dnipro River, to then exit towards the Crimea, cut off Crimea, and then essentially block Russian communications, and instead of going through Zaporizhia region, try to cut off this land bridge by attacking from Dnipro, and kind of that's the general outline. And supposedly General Zaluzhny has already reached out to the allies to try to communicate that plan and try to discuss the possibilities of deliveries and so on. Now, an obvious criticism and an obvious skepticism that a lot of you and a lot of other people are expressing is that, well, why would Ukraine plan an offensive if one offensive already failed? And I'm not completely sure I understand this criticism. Just because you had a plan and that plan didn't work for certain reasons doesn't mean that you cannot evaluate the new situation you're in and prepare for the new situation, adapt to the things that you didn't adapt for in your previous plan, and try again. It's just complete logic, because the opposite to it is that Ukraine just takes a passive position and takes a beating. This is something that is proposed by the US allies, at least again, the rumors are talking about this, that the US and NATO is proposing Ukraine to maybe take 2024, wait up, accumulate powers, be in strategic defense for the whole year, and then in 2025, when the accumulated forces come in, that's when they should start certain activities. At least that's the discussion that is surrounding this topic. And both options are possible, but I think it's not about rumors and there is no one option that is better, whereas the other option that is worse. I think there are ups and downs for both of them, and if General Zaluzhny presents a plan, if they war game this plan, if they prepare for this plan, if they start engaging deliveries, again, if they agree on new platform for deliveries, then I don't see any possibilities. Obviously, this all hinges again on the delivery timeline. We know that one of the previous problems with the Ukrainian offensive during the summer was lack of the proper deliveries for execution of their tasks and lack of capabilities. If the resources are there, Ukraine can do it. Therefore, I don't think that having a plan for an offensive 2024 is a bad idea, to wargame it, to test it, especially because there are further developments from the left bank of Dnipro. More details are now known about the state, about the left bank, and more knowledge is there about Ukrainian plans around this left bank of Dnipro. It seems that before, Ukraine was trying to see if they can just land and take significant portions of control from Russians, try to cut them off, cut the roads. That was the initial goal of the offensive. They tried doing it, but Russia responded, and Ukraine still controls certain areas in the area. It still controls certain points along the Dnipro River, but it's not in depth. It's not in depth. So the new plan that is supposedly is being right now worked on, and it's already having certain level of success, is that Ukrainians are having these bridgeheads. These bridgeheads have reconnaissance force on them, and the focus is on the reconnaissance force. These reconnaissance forces, they provide additional forward-based intelligence with drones, with scouting. They also provide a nice like, how do you say, like a magnet, like a anchor point for Russians to try to attack. So Ukrainians more or less know and can predict where Russians will operate in this area. But the main point of this forward-facing positions is to draw out the artillery. And what was happening over the last couple of months in this area, the artillery was the main focus. it was always a question why in this area were specifically some of the Ukrainian most well-known drone-based units located. So like Magyar's birds and some of the Balu forces that are very, very famous drone operators, like one of the best. And not only these drones were shooting down the Russian infantry fighting vehicles and tanks, they were also targeting artillery extremely heavily. And the plan is that by using drones, the scouts, and artillery to create the pressure on the Russian line of artillery, because we know that Russian artillery is having issue because of the wear and tear of their barrels, because of the fact that the new artillery that is coming into Russian service is from the older stock. This artillery has a shorter range. A shorter range means that Ukrainian artillery from the right bank can actually very comfortably reach that artillery with the help of the birds from the drones and so on to target that artillery. They are now, after months of work, are able to push that artillery further. It has been now reported that less and less artillery is present within the reach area of Ukrainian forces, and the intensity of fires has really decreased. So, why is this done? This is done to solve the problem that I just didn't know the solution for, and I was always expressing this. How would Ukraine cross the river and supply that if Russia can just target and destroy any kind of pontoon bridges or anything like this? So one of those questions was what to do with artillery. And now I know, and now I'm sharing this with you, that Ukrainians have been very intensively working specifically to push back Russian artillery. So once there's not a lot of artillery, like maybe a couple of pieces here and there, but generally speaking, there is no sufficient density. At that moment, Ukrainians can start moving in pontoon bridges. They can start building ability to deliver equipment en masse to the right bank. There is still the second question that I said about the planes. Those are still the question, but we did hear before that Ukrainians were also concentrating anti-air assets in this area. This now kind of explains what the plan is. This is no secret. It's been kind of discussed publicly also on Russian sources, and there is a good possibility, if we are not looking at this as this is something that Ukraine needs to achieve in a month, in 2 months or so on, but more like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if by 2024 spring, when the weather is set, then Russians would not have artillery control over the river of Dnipro? Wouldn't be nice. And that this plan is kind of working towards that. Again, as everything in a war, nothing is given. Maybe Russia will adapt. Maybe Russia will have a long-range artillery. Who knows? Like, things might happen. But it's a possibility. It's a point of work, and we can clearly see what is the strategic the decision that is made around this area. Very interesting. I will definitely follow this. On most of the other directions, except for Sinkivka, so around the northern part of Kupiansk, this is where Ukrainians are actually counterattacking and retaking some of the territory. But on all of the other directions, it's Russians that are attacking Ukrainians. I will not go into the tactical details of specific battles. There are better channels to do that. But we are now fully aware that Ukraine is in full defense mode. There are still reports that Russia is still concentrating forces, most notably around the south of Avdiivka, but I already start hearing here and there from Ukrainian sources that Russians are somewhat running out of steam. Most notably, there were certain changes in tactics. One of the interesting change is that Russians, after suffering tremendous losses here in Avdiivka and other directions, they've changed their common tactics. I'm pretty sure you've seen the videos or pictures where Russians are riding on top of the infantry fighting vehicle, and then they're driving into the combat, and they dismount, and then they try to rush into Ukrainian trenches to clear out these trenches. It seems because they just cannot get to these trenches and they get destroyed by the drones and anti-air vehicle weaponry from Ukrainian side on the way to those trenches. Russians have now adopted a new strategy where they are sending forces behind the infantry fighting vehicles. So now armor goes kind of in front and tries to reach the trenches whereas the troops are kind of going behind. It makes it slower, it makes it more susceptible to fire, but apparently the calculation is that if they destroy the vehicle, then the troops can potentially still make it. If the troops get hit, then the infantry fighting vehicle is still there to evac or something like this. It's an interesting development and something definitely of note. And another thing to be of note is that Russia and Ukrainians are reporting that Russia has started using less infantry fighting vehicles and more APCs. Infantry fighting vehicle is supposed to, well, fight. So it kind of hovers around with the infantry at the battlefield. It shoots, it helps suppress the enemy, so it helps stay in the battlefield. We see that Russia now switched more to using more of the BMPs, which are the APCs. APCs essentially is armored taxis. So their goal is to arrive to the spot, unload the troops, and get out. It doesn't really have any kind of big guns, and Russians are not really using it for support. I think this is because of the change of tactics, that they are not really having the ability to hover around and really fire at Ukrainian positions because they get instantly destroyed. Talking about losses around Avdiivka, we have actually a couple of interesting things to talk about. Russian losses, and this is going to help you get a perspective on what's the scale of losses Russian versus Ukrainian. Because oftentimes I talk about that Russia is suffering horrendous losses and Ukrainians are defending, and you mention is well, is it a lot? Is it not a lot? What's the scale? So here we see the open source information. This is, I believe, is from War Spotting, Ukrainian War Spotting, and they have accumulated, this is visually confirmed, losses of equipment, and obviously there is a little bit of a deviation based on if it's true. There's obviously all of these discussions that it's only about things that are displayed on videos and pictures, but generally speaking, from October 10th, Russian losses around Avdiivka by the mid-December are now 334 vehicles. You can look out the breakdown over here. To compare it with Ukrainian losses in the same direction, it's 25. That's the difference that we're talking about. Again, Russian losses, 334 vehicles, Ukrainian 25. Obviously, troops don't have the same luxury because vehicles are not very often used by defenders, but they are still used for counterattacks, and Ukrainians do counterattack. But it definitely shows what is the disparity and how much more losses Russia is generally acquiring. It is proven with video evidence and everything. It is horrendous. You tell any kind of American or even any kind of NATO military power, hey, would you like to assault a city, a fortified position, where you get vehicle losses that are about over 10 times more? Would you assault that? And also, by the way, not really taking the village, not even taking the fortification, just kind of reaching the outskirts of a couple of important points, not even getting in there. Russia is in a horrendous state. This is obviously a political reason that they're doing right now. Putin is self-confident. This was especially clear in his recent speech. He is as deluded as he was in the February of 2022 when he invaded Ukraine. I think, especially when we're listening to the Putin speech just recently, some of the Western journalists put it as oh my God, Putin is so calm and he's so in control. Oh my God, there we go, he has a plan. No, it's not about him having a plan. The fact that he came out controlled, the fact that he came out very calm, for me is a great tell, because That means that he's again living in his fantasy world where Russian military is like number 2 in the world, that they're crushing Ukraine on all fronts. I'll remind you, they're still trying to take this one settlement of a pre-war population of 70,000 for over 2 months with all their might. This is the delusion that Putin is living in. He thinks everything is great. He thinks he's in control. He's very confident that the West is not supporting Ukraine and so on. Everything is going his way. That is great for us, in a sense that not that the West is not supporting Ukraine. That is a problem that we need to solve. But what Putin is thinking, and Putin is deluded, and he is out of touch of reality, and we are happy to do it. That means that he will continue doing political mistakes. He will continue doing the mistakes as ordering additional attacks, despite whatever the situation on frontline is. So whenever they say Putin is calm, yeah. I'm glad about this, because remember, when he was not calm, it was when during the Kharkiv offensive, when Ukrainians were attacking and recapturing territory of Kharkiv, and then Putin came out on video and he was visually nervous. He was like really, really nervous about the situation, and after that he started mobilization, and that was a really bad situation for Ukraine after that. And finally, some other news. One of the most important one is from this area where Ukrainians have used drones to strike Russian airfield. Supposedly over 10 military aircraft have been damaged or destroyed, which is great news. We're looking more into the details, but any damage to Russian aviation is a big boon for Ukraine. Another story that made some waves is from the Zakarpattia region of Ukraine, where a local MP of the village thrown some grenades during a meeting with the population, and a lot of wounded and potentially 2 people in critical conditions. It's a big story, but I found out the details, and the situation is very much a local weird situation where there was a person with questionable mind state. He supposedly was a veteran, so maybe PTSDs played there. But what happened is that there was a budget from the previous year, and this guy, the MP, was stating that for the previous year there was certain inaccuracies in that budget, and then for the budget for the 2024, the head of the village is supposedly adding 50% increase in his payouts to himself. So some kind of a conflict on that side. After that he says that we need to have a vote on who should be the village of the head, who should be the head of the village, and he proposed himself, but then even his own party that he was the member of voted him down, saying like, well, what are you doing? Like, let's not do it. He then got really upset by it, and supposedly after that he went in to come back with grenades and just intrude in the some of the discussion in the meeting with the local villagers. It's a weird local situation. The main point here is obviously grenades. This is the effect of war and availability of weapons, but this is nothing that we should kind of take out to a bigger picture, more of an incident, a very unfortunate, tragic incident that just happened in one local part of Ukraine. And to round it all up today, I want to say huge thanks to the moderating team. I received a message from them and some other friends with a nice card with a beautiful design of Ukraine Matters. And it says, "Happy holidays, so glad we get to spend so much time together. Are you sick of us yet?" And the answer is no, guys. I couldn't be happier to know all of you. So thank you so much, Ali, Newman, Kathleen, Travis, Mark, Raven, Lisa, and Jack. Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate it a lot. One of the major things that I always said is that I am really bad at keeping friends and reminding friends that I care about them, and especially because when I'm focused on some certain topic. So the fact that you're sticking with me with this channel, with this community, is making this community better. Without you, I couldn't have done it ever. Slava Ukraini, guys. I love you all, and I'll see you next time.